Great, great. It's good to be back here with everybody. I hope you've been continuing with your exercise. I hope you've been trying some new things in terms of some of the things that we've talked about. And I'm going to review just a little bit before we move ahead. I like to just kind of review, especially when I present new information. And so we talked about the impact that the sun has on all life on the planet. It affects our mood, it affects our health physically, mentally, and emotionally. We talked about the impact that the sun has on our mitochondria, and we reviewed on what what the mitochondria are in our bodies. And you all remembered that the mitochondria are the powerhouses for our cells and for our bodies. It's what makes energy for us to feel good. When we're not feeling so great, we have to kind of check ourselves and say, do I really need caffeine, or do I need to examine, am I really feeding my mitochondria what they need so they can do what they normally do, which is to make energy? We talked about the impact that not getting enough natural sunlight and getting too much artificial blue light can have on us, right? And specifically, the impact that it has on the mitochondria. And what it does to the mitochondria is that, being in front of these blue lights, in front of our screens, our TVs, our indoor lighting, our environment in our offices, getting too much of that blue artificial light overstimulates the mitochondria because they're very sensitive to the 24-hour circadian cycle. It's what sets our circadian cycle. So instead of it being able to signal to us that it's time to power down in the evening, as long as we stay immersed and bathed in this blue light, it keeps signaling to our mitochondria that it's time to stay awake. So our mitochondria get fatigued, they get exhausted, and then they're not able to do as much as what they're supposed to do, which is produce energy for us. And it does that by grabbing up the glucose that's in the bloodstream, right? So if they're exhausted and they can't do that like they're supposed to do, that means that there's too much glucose floating around the bloodstream. There's not enough energy that's being produced. They're being fatigued, they're being damaged, and we end up suffering, developing illnesses like diabetes, like obesity, like things that predispose us to heart disease and metabolic disorders because the mitochondria are not functioning like they're supposed to. And so it's just important to be able to view it from that perspective as well. Because our why, in terms of what we're doing here with this 6 weeks of fitness, is so important. I mean, of course, yes, we want to lose weight, so we think, let's just exercise. We got to exercise. We got to exercise, which we do, and exercise actually, that aerobic exercise actually helps in the production and the functioning of the mitochondria. So you're helping the mitochondria when you're exercising. But we also have to be mindful that not only is it about the exercise, but it's about what goes in our bodies. Remember that this is 80% nutrition and 20% fitness in terms of weight loss goals. So I don't want you to lose sight of the nutritional side of things with this. So mitochondria and blood glucose and diabetes have a very interconnected relationship. So when we're talking about health, and we're talking about our well-being, and we're talking about staving off certain types of illnesses, we have to think, okay, what can I do to make sure that I keep my mitochondria functioning well? So we talked last week a little bit about some of the kind of vitamins that we can take. We talked a little bit about making sure that we're mindful of our sleep cycle, and powering down and backing off and creating a digital sunset. I don't know, is anybody familiar with that term, a digital sunset? Where you can have your devices actually power down at a certain time. I know I have my computer set so that the to offset the blue light in the evening. So if I do need to work after sunset, then my screen is going to have a very reddish hue because it's red that counteracts that blue light that's coming off the screen. And most computers have this setting. If you kind of go into your computer settings, you'll find settings for blue light, not only on the computer, but also on the phone. So that kind of helps to prevents you from being overly stimulated, right? So if you have to work in the evening, because you know the days are the days are not long yet. So if you need to be able to be on the computer, you don't want to be up until 2 and 3 in the morning because you're overstimulated, but you can do your work and then be able to rest. You can also put full spectrum lighting in your home. You can put red light in maybe in your bedroom, or for the children also, to kind of help again mitigating that overstimulation of the artificial blue light that we're getting in our overall environment as well. So I just wanted to remind you of those things. I also want to say that in terms of just our motivation around continuing to um, look for eating the right kind of foods, we want to make sure that we're not developing cardiovascular illnesses, because it's our mitochondria that help to power our heart. It helps to power muscles, right? So in addition to the most mitochondrial rich organs in our body is our brain, our hearts, and then our muscles. That our muscle cells are packed with mitochondria. Why? Because we need energy in those organs, right? So in order to make sure that we're getting it, we have to make sure that we're giving our bodies what it needs in order to produce those mitochondria. There are trillions of mitochondria in our bodies, and hundreds and even thousands just in one muscle cell, right? So it's such a key component to everything that we're doing, and the energy that we need to have to function. So, um, as far as muscle growth and development, we're talking mitochondria. If we're talking about insulin sensitivity, we're talking mitochondria. We're talking about feeling high energy, we're talking mitochondria. If we're talking about mental clarity, we're talking mitochondria. And if we're talking about improving our kidney and our heart function, we're talking mitochondria. So I don't want you to overlook the importance of thinking about, okay, when I'm thinking about things that I want to eat, I want to make sure that we're prioritizing things that we know that we can do to strengthen these very, very, very critical organelles that we have in our body. So we have to pay attention to what can help them, right? So we did mention, like I said, we mentioned diet last time, some of the B vitamins, the CoQ10. We mentioned some of the vitamins that would be helpful, the minerals, the trace minerals that would be helpful in nurturing those organelles, the mitochondria. We talked about hydration, the importance of having plenty of water like we're supposed to. We talked about exercising, how the movement helps to move the fluids in and out of our cells to make sure that the mitochondria are functioning properly. But I wanted to add a little bit more to our toolbox, because some things we'll remember, some things we won't. So I want you to do something every day. This is a daily function, right? From the moment that we are conceived till the day we take our last breath, it's the mitochondria that is powering the cells in our bodies, right? When we think about muscle tissue, the most important muscle is our heart. From the time it starts beating, it's the mitochondria that is providing the power to make sure that it's functioning properly. And, we know that over time, the mitochondrial function diminishes, the amount that are being produced diminishes. Why? Because we're just not nurturing it like we're supposed to. It's not like, oh, well, we're just supposed to go out like that. No, we want to go out in good health. We want to go out strong. So we want to make sure that we are actually nurturing our bodies, putting foods into our bodies that are going to specifically nurture those mitochondria and taste good at the same time, right? Because I don't want anybody feeling like, well, eating healthy is like boring, right? Like, this is not boring. It's not boring to say that we're going to feed ourselves well. So what kind of things can we do? I'm going to refer to my notes here so I stay on point again. What kind of things can we do to make sure that our mitochondria are nourished? So, um, 4 things that we can do. Something called hypoxia, right? Hypoxia is means a shortage of oxygen. It's an interesting phenomena that when the oxygen levels in our body decreases, it increases the production of the mitochondria because the body is saying something going on here. We need to make sure that we've got enough mitochondria here and present to keep the body going, right? And that happens when we're at high altitudes. That also happens when we engage in aerobic exercise because we're using a lot of oxygen. So it forces our body to start producing more mitochondria. So what you're going to be doing this evening in terms of just whatever kind of exercise Carmen is going to be doing, hopefully it's going to be aerobic or something that's going to help increase the mitochondria production in the body. Of course, food, and I'm going to touch on like some top foods that will really, really help the production of mitochondria in the body. We also have the thyroid hormone, T3, which is why I mentioned last week that it's important to make sure you get your hormone levels, your thyroid hormonal levels checked to make sure that they're normal, because if they're not, you need to have that adjusted because that's going to affect the production of the mitochondria as well as the adrenal functions and the sex hormones. Cold exposure, ice plunges are becoming a thing. And one of the things that happens with this ice plunge is that it also forces the mitochondria to replicate, right? So that's one of the byproducts of these cold plunges or living in colder climates because more mitochondria are needed to make more energy. Making more energy is going to create more internal heat. So the body does that in order to create more heat when it's in a colder environment. So those are four additional things that we can do to help our body to create more and to increase the activity of mitochondria in the body. Now, there was a study done in 2023 studying the different diets. So there was 5 different diets that were studied to see how they would impact mitochondrial health. So let me just make a reference to the studies that I have here. So it was the high fat diet was studied, the calorie restricted diet was studied, the ketogenic diet was studied, a fasting diet, well, it's kind of like a diet, but fasting was studied, as well as the Mediterranean slash vegetarian diet were all studied to see the impact that it has on mitochondrial production and mitochondrial health. So I'm going to share with you some of the results from examining each of those diets. So with a high fat diet, and that's a diet where anywhere from 30 to 35% of the calories that a person takes in comes from fat, right? So that's a third of what you eat comes from fat. And what was found was that it actually decreases mitochondrial abundance, right? Not surprisingly. Um, it contributed to insulin resistance and metabolic disorders. There was a decrease in ATP production, and there was an increase in the amount of damaged mitochondria. So, in summary, for a high fat diet, it has overall pretty negative impact on mitochondrial function, unfortunately. Then we have the calorie restricted diet, where there's a reduction of 20 to 30% of your normal caloric intake. So with the calorie restricted diet, there was a decrease in the number of mitochondria being produced. There was a decrease in the amount of enzymes that were being produced by the mitochondria. There was an increase in the ATP production, a decrease in oxidative stress, and it also induced mitography, which is the removal, the cells go through a cleansing process where they're removing damaged DNA from the cell. So there was an increase in that. So it improved um, function, mitochondrial health. with the ketogenic diet, which is a high fat, low carb diet, had both positive and negative effects. So there was an increase in the mitochondrial number and function. There was um, a significant increase in the risk of prediabetes and diabetes type 2, not surprisingly, with the increase of it's mostly animal fats. So with the increase of the animal fat, it's going to create more of an insulin resistance condition. Um, Impaired mitochondrial biogenesis, meaning it was much harder for the cells to make more mitochondria. And there was an increased cardiac fibrosis, which means scarring of the heart tissue, the heart muscle tissue, caused by excessive accumulation of collagen. So in general, there was an increase of insulin resistance and damage to the mitochondria long term with the ketogenic diet. With fasting, and we're talking about 12 hours or more. So whether it's intermittent fasting or there's fasting for like a day on and a day off, there was an increase in mitochondrial activity and an increase in mitochondrial numbers. There was an increase in the selective degradation of damaged mitochondria and an increase in mitochondrial function. So fasting was something that actually helped to kick up the mitochondria activity and function. And then we also have the Mediterranean diet. And in that Mediterranean diet, it increased the biogenesis, which is the increase of the replication of mitochondria. There was an increase in the function of liver and muscle tissue. There was, with that diet, there's a high phenolic content, and that was thought to be the reason for why there was an increase in the function and the number of mitochondria with the diet. And there was also an uptick in the health of the mitochondria. So it also improved overall function, reproduction, and fusion of the mitochondria. So out of the 5 diets that were studied, the Mediterranean diet had the strongest impact on the mitochondrial function. Are you all familiar with the Mediterranean diet? Okay. So we
Yes,
know we know the Mediterranean diet, we know that it's high in fruits, it's high in vegetables, it's high in healthy oils, it's high in whole grains, right? Your basic vegetarian diet. And with the Mediterranean diet, that they do have fish and in there as well, but so you can do with or without it. But that was the best, right? Um, it's also found in teas and in chocolates also. So foods like, now these are some of the top foods that kind of help with mitochondrial health and reproduction are soybeans. And you all might want to take this down because you want to put this on your shopping list to make sure that you're incorporating like at least a serving a day, right? Because that's how we're going to actually have an impact on what I've been talking about these last 3 sessions, right? I'm really underscoring the importance of mitochondrial health because what you eat is going to all boil down to what goes on a cellular level. And what we want is to feel good, right? We want to feel good. We want to feel energized. We want to feel like we can keep up, with the exercise that we're doing. How can we do that? By feeding our muscle cells what it needs, right? The mitochondria in our muscle cells. So in order to do that, we have to give ourselves the kind of nutrients and things that our mitochondria need to reproduce themselves and to function well and to have more of them present in our cells. So foods like soybeans, foods like cacao beans, onions, apples, blueberries, red grapes, cinnamon, and coffee beans. They all have bioactive compounds that help to increase the amount of oxygen in our cells. They increase the mitochondrial activity and they increase ATP production. Anybody need me to repeat those again?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay. So soybeans, go back to it. Soybeans, cacao beans, onions, apples, blueberries, red grapes, cinnamon, and coffee beans. Now with soybeans, we only need like 4 ounces a day. And with soybeans, we could do something like edamame, right? You know, those appetizers that we have in Japanese restaurants, they sell them in the freezer department. You just steam them, and they're a great appetizer, a great snack. Cacao beans or powder and cocoa or cacao. Like this is my cocoa powder. I put it in my smoothies every day or most days. I try and get it in like as many times as I can, as many ways as I can get this stuff in, I get it in. That's just a delicious way for me to get it in. And cocoa, cacao, you know, I had to look up the difference between the two because there's cocoa, there's cacao, and it's interesting because in Mesoamerica or Mexico, where most of the cacao for the United States was harvested, it was called cacao. And it wasn't until like the early part of the 18th century that Europeans decided that it should be called cocoa. So it kind of got flipped around. It's just the 2 letters on the end. So it went from cacao, which is how the Mesoamericans pronounced it, to cocoa. And difference in processing is the cacao, it gets fermented, it gets dried, it can get ground. The cocoa has to be roasted in order to get that richer, heavier chocolate kind of a flavor. It's a slight difference in the two, but in terms of nutrients, the cacao has a bit more nutrients and minerals in it because it doesn't go through the roasting process, which eliminates some of that from the cocoa powder, but they both have antioxidant properties as well as the phenols in it as well. But the cacao has a bit more. So you have the cacao nibs that they sell and the cacao powder. It also has tryptophan in it. And let's see. Of course, it does have some caffeine in it. So if you're sensitive to that, you know, you might want to have it earlier in the day rather than later in the day. And then we have resveratrol, which we get in the grapes, but there's not enough resveratrol in the grapes or even in red wine to give us the amount that we need to really, really be nourishing our mitochondria on a daily basis. So you might think about and consider getting a resveratrol supplement to really help with the mitochondria. And then we have nitrate-rich foods. And of course, that's big in the exercise arena, getting nitrates into our system because it helps to dilate the blood vessels. It's useful also, of course, in terms of cardiovascular issues because it helps to bring down the blood pressure by dilating the blood vessels. So having foods that are high in nitrates, like your beets. Beets are a big thing right now. Beet powder, beet capsules, arugula, lettuce, some of the lettuces are good for, you know, nitrates in it. An amount of beets that you can take, something as small as Half a pound of beets are 2 to 3 small beets or 1.5 medium-sized beets. And you can grate them, you can slice them, but just try and see if you can get them in, as a serving, whether you grate it in your salad or, ask for it to be put in your salad, get a serving in. Try and put some arugula in your diet also, so that you can get those nitrates in it. Those all help to increase the function of the mitochondria. And I'm just going to challenge you all to get a serving in a day. Get one serving in a day, okay? And if you're really feeling like you want to really up your energy, go for two. Go for 2 servings a day. So you could put beets and arugula into a salad. You can have some cacao in your smoothie in the morning. You can take your supplement of resveratrol and just try it daily. See where you end up in a month in terms of just your energy, your vitality, your wakefulness. And also don't forget to incorporate the other things we talked about in terms of just trying to mitigate the red light now environment, trying to get ourselves to sleep at a reasonable time so that we can get rest, going to bed in the evening and waking up in the mornings, instead of pushing our nighttime hours into the wee hours of the morning and then forcing ourselves to wake up with caffeine to kind of, we want some natural energy happening. So that was it for me for this addition to our mitochondrial health. I wanted to leave enough time to have some questions if anybody had any questions about um, adding on to strengthening our mitochondria to help balance out, prevent diabetes, because this is big in terms of trying to prevent diabetes and just having some natural energy. Any questions?
Sky,
I did see some things pop up, and somebody could read what's in the chat because I'm not looking at the chat.
I'll read it, but I have a
Yeah.
question. This is it good to have, instead of eating the beets, make beet juice? Like, will that help also?
Definitely, you can have beet juice. Just be mindful that beet juice is concentrated. It's very sweet. So, depending upon your tolerance for sugar, if you're hypoglycemic, you don't want to drink a lot of beet juice, just straight beet juice all at once, right? Because it can cause your blood sugar to swing. But yes, you can definitely have beet juice. You can add it to other juices, or you can have like a shot of that beet juice.
Mhm. Okay, so the question is soy good for men?
Yes, it is. We're talking about 4 ounces a day. We're not talking about anything that's going to derange them, because of the estrogen content.
Then the next one is like, I'm curious, is there a reason why it's just red grapes? Would the grapes?
It's the phenols. It's the phenols in the red color.
Okay. Um, yeah, I guess that's the questions. If there's anyone who have questions, then raise your hand in the chat. Raise your hand in the group and I will release you.
Brittany has a
So,
question.
okay. Unmute, Brittany.
Hi, you hear me? I'm sorry.
Hear you.
Quick question. Someone introduced me to Celtic sea salt, and I'm not sure because he claims he's healthy, but he told me it helps detoxify your body if you drink it in water. Do you know anything about that?
I've heard about it, but I can't say that I've studied it enough to be able to make a comment on its effects for detoxing.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm curious, what happened to the grapefruit? You know, the yellow ones? Where did it go? Do you know?
Yellow grapefruits?
Yeah, I only see the red ones.
No. I-
I looked all the different stores. They're not there any longer. Only the pink ones. The other color.
Interesting. Don't know what's going on in Florida right now. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's been a while. I've been looking for it, and no place. It's like doesn't exist.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay, so we have Miss Carmen waiting in the wings if there are no other questions.
Thank you so much, Sky. That was very helpful. So like this information that you gave would help for people who have high blood pressure.
High blood pressure, pre-diabetic, cardiac issues, energy issues, sleep issues. I mean, these are all things that the mitochondria are responsible for, right? So if we prioritize the things that are going to help with the mitochondrial function, we're going to see the ripple effect in our ability to be able to rest better and our ability to be able to manage our glucose levels. I mean, there's a one-to-one relationship between mitochondrial function and blood glucose levels, right? So
So you said you put cocoa in your smoothie. So what kind of smoothie do you usually would make? Because I would do more fruits, like put in like papaya
so I'll
and
give you an example. So this morning I had a half a frozen banana. I had a handful of it was a mix, blueberries, blackberries, raspberry, and strawberries. So I put like a handful of that in there. I had some non-dairy yogurt, a cashew-based yogurt. I had I put some almond milk. I put some peanut butter, some cocoa powder. I put 2 dates and some hemp seed. I think that's all I put in there today. Oh, and I did add some fresh ginger. I had some fresh ginger added to it also.
and last question, how about like instead of doing the fruits, do oatmeal? And you
Of
put all
course.
this.
Yeah, I mean, I switch them up. I just kind of rotate them.
Okay.
I use rice milk, I'll use oat milk, I use hemp milk, I rotate them.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I want to hear some things next week about what you're trying, what's going in the diet, what's going on the plate this week.
I have a Mediterranean book, recipe book, so I'm gonna dust it off.
There you go. There you go. You're
Okay.
welcome. You're welcome. You're very
Thank you
welcome.
so much, Sky. Thank you
You're
for
very
the
welcome.
questions, everyone. Now we're gonna get into
Carmen, we ready for you, Carmen.
All right.